Hey gang, Bill and Ken, another episode of the Gun Guys. Listen, we're sitting in my living room in Idaho talking about gun guy stuff, and one of the things we're going to talk about briefly is what we'll call old world holsters. When the whole practical shooting market was created back in the 70s, when Cooper kicked this thing off, IPSC was created, the competition world exploded. What people don't realize what the standard was back then. For example, practical shooting evolved from quick draw.
This all goes back into the 60s.
Yeah, it goes back into the quick draw episode of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And the equipment reflected that a lot. The original Jeff Cooper's big bear leather slaps, well over half the contestants were shooting single action armies from point shoot. So anyway, when it kicked off, when Bill and I got started shooting IPSC back in the day, the common rigs were not anything like you see today. They were typically leather, what they called gunfighter rigs. They were gun belts that were worn so you sometimes below the waist. This was this is a rig made by Andy Anderson called the Thunderbolt, and this was kind of considered the optimum one. One of the unique things about it, you see a forward rake holster, steel lined, and it's designed so the pistol sits in the holster, just sits in here. But if you're going to do anything strenuous, you had a tension screw that you could tighten down so that the gun, you had to really jerk to get out. So if you were shooting a course, say like the Cooper Assault, which thank God they don't shoot anymore because it was dangerous beyond belief, one of the things you had to do was engage targets, reholster, and go over a 6-foot wall. Well, if you lost your gun, you were discontinued.
And you had to go through a tunnel.
Yeah, and then you had to crawl through a tunnel. Well, anyway, so the guys would stick their gun in their holster, and as they're running up to the wall, they'd give this thing a couple of torques. Well, your gun was not going to go anywhere. So the Thunderbolt gunfighter rigs were pretty much, this style was really popular. Mill Sparks made one called the Model 120, which is very similar. But that's what everybody used. And the interesting thing is, the next step that came along the way, and I'll remove my blaster here, the next evolution, if you will, was there was so much emphasis in practical shooting on cross draw. Most people don't realize that. And you and I can remember where the cross draw was a requirement because you had to do weak hand draws. So here's a holster made by Gordon Davis that's very similar in design, actually uses the same function tension screw, but if you'll notice, you wear this thing cross draw, so your pistol was worn pretty much right here. So you had access to easily to reach around and draw the gun a weak hand draw. And this was popular for a huge period of time. As a matter of fact, Ray Chapman had Bianchi make a holster called the Chapman High Ride, I think it was called.
Yep.
And everybody was using those things. But
and actually for, when you draw them with your, strong hand, it was actually easy to get a real good grip.
Yeah, the holster thing has evolved continuously. And people say, well, this isn't practical, which led to holsters more like this. This is the original Sparks 1AT, in which basically you carried the gun on your hip in more of a traditional belt carry holster. This was considered practical back in the day, even though it's thick and bulky, but we evolved from those kind of gun belt rigs to a hip holster, and this carried on for a long time, and of course it continued to go on. And the holsters market has, back to the large part, it's now polymer. You and I still like leather, but polymer holsters are real popular. And what a lot of people don't realize is, for example, when we started IDPA, one of our big goals was to make sure people had holsters that were concealable and absolutely what people carried. Well, that kind of evolved.
Well, as you know, when we did the IDPA thing, coming out with the rules of what a practical holster was, that was the part we were never
more time than anything else.
We spent more time on it and never really got it right.
Because practical is, and let's face it, competitors will always take advantage of whatever they can to get ahead. So
always.
But the kicker is, the holster thing, understand, has continued to evolve. As a matter of fact, we've now kind of come a circle. We're back to where concealable holsters are real popular and probably the best-selling holsters in the marketplace. So the kicker that most people don't get is that it's never been really an easy process to define. We pick what works and what fills our needs.
Yeah.
And you and I have got probably more than one box of holsters.
Oh yeah, yeah. But it is quite an evolution from the early days and the, kind of the leather slap rigs, all the way up to, things getting pretty practical in competition, and going, back in practical again, and then now it's just, people actually do go to like IDPA matches now with a real carry holster. I mean, there's. It depends. It depends on what your motivation of shooting the match is. If it's to be a, more proficient with your carry gun, you're going to carry gear. If the motivation is to try to, win the trophy, well, you're going to get gamey. So.
And we see in some competitions, some of the disciplines, the holsters look like an orthopedic surgeon designed it. And the guns are sticking clear out. You can pass your fist between your body and the holster. And yet the word practical has probably been prostituted more than anything else in the shooting game over the years.
Well, like, IPSC shooting, USPSA IPSC shooting, I mean, that should have been action shooting from day one.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with practical. Didn't have anything to do with practical, as you can see here, from day one.
Day one.
It should have been action shooting.
Yeah. And the kicker is, you guys need to be the ones that look at your lifestyle, look at your needs. What do you want? If you're just going to the range, periodically to shoot for a range day, your choice of holster doesn't matter that much. And choose wisely. If on the other hand you do plan on carrying a gun, you might want to look at a holster that, we know holsters have to be comfortable. If they're not comfortable, I don't care what they do, you're not going to carry them. People ask me about the inside the waist, gun at the junk thing. I go, if it's not comfortable, I don't, dude, I've reached a point in life, comfort is number one. Yeah. So, but you pick the product and the system that works for you. Lord knows the market's full of stuff. You guys got an extensive holster line that you market, and it's worth looking at because WilsonCombat has kind of stayed on the edge of, this is the stuff that the customers typically are looking for.
Yeah, you need something that's comfortable and positively secures the gun, and you can do a good draw with a firing grip.
Yeah, and that's real important. You got to be able to get your hand on the gun exactly the way you want to grip it to fire.
Before you pull it out of the holster.
Yeah, and if you don't get a good grip to start with, anybody that says, well, I'll adjust along the way, that's not a good pick in the holsters. Move on. So, just a little burp about holsters and history. Hope you enjoyed it. Tune in. Hit the subscribe button. More stuff coming. And oh, by the way, if there's things you're interested in maybe seeing down the road, don't be afraid to hit that comment section and let us know what you like and what you'd like to see in the future. In the meantime, stay safe. We'll see you down the trail.